I am the Executive Director of Transformative Culture Project, which is a nonprofit organization that uses arts and culture as tools for social and economic power. And I also teach adjunct here at Worcester State in the sociology department and also at Clark University. My work is divided between Worcester and Boston. I still spend a great deal of my time at the Transformative Culture Project. For the last 12 years, I have overseen programs there that connect young people, especially working class youth, youth of color, from primarily Boston to after school programming that trains them in media production like this as a career pathway, and also connects them to community organizations working to dismantle the injustices in their communities and helping them learn to use media and media culture and the arts as tools to use narrative justice to disrupt those. And then we also have in-school programs where we connect community artists from a broader spectrum than just media, other arts and culture as well, to classrooms. In Boston Public Schools, we've also worked in schools in Holyoke, Worcester, and Lowell as well. Based on the experience that I've had working across media, education, social justice, sociology, I teach a number of courses at Worcester State and Clark that help make sure that I'm paying those lessons forward so that other people can do the same work. This past year, my husband and I became guardians of a family friend's son, who is our nephew, as far as we're concerned, as foster parents. And we had to work really hard to get him the support and education that he deserved and needed because of his background. And the school that he had been at was going to hold him back, primarily for behavioral reasons that were clearly deeply connected to childhood trauma. He had been in 3 foster homes. When we were able to get him to Chandler Magnet, where my daughter was going into the dual language program, the resources that he had there, a full-time school adjustment counselor, an assistant principal with a background in social work, who recognized immediately that he needed additional supports. We didn't have to fight for a 45-day evaluation to make sure that he was getting the 504 accommodations that he needed. We knew from academic testing that he scored high above average in almost every academic area. So repeating another year of academic schooling would have been an enormous disservice to him. Seeing the disparities between those 2 schools and knowing that even though I was able to get this young man who lived with us from one school to one that he was able to get what he needed, there were still tons of kids that were in the other school that were not getting the same services. And so that was a big moment for me to see that there was more change that needed to happen. And then the debate around sex ed this spring also was a big wake-up call for me for how disconnected the administration and school committee were from the desires of parents. When I spoke with fellow kindergarten parents on the playground after school, they were puzzled as to why anyone would find it controversial for our young people to have access to the information that they need to make healthy decisions about their bodies. As a youth worker who works with teens and has since I was a teen myself, I've seen the impact over the last 20 years of Bush-era abstinence-only education policies. And the abstinence-based education that was being looked at in the spring was rooted in the same failed methodology. Boston has invested quite a bit in K through 12 comprehensive sex ed, and we have seen the progress that that's making. There's also a lot of work being done by organizations like ours to bring in partners like the Boston Area Rape Crisis Center and Planned Parenthood to do peer-to-peer trainings by young people for young people to help make sure they have access to this information. And I know that Planned Parenthood here in Worcester and the Get Real Teen Council has done a great deal of that work with organizations to make up for our school's failure to provide that information. We see what happens when they don't have access to it. Our chlamydia rates have skyrocketed. We had 100 teen births in the city last year, 100 births by teen parents in the city in 2017, and over half of those were Latina girls. And so we see across all of our school outcomes that the Latinx community is disparately impacted. And if we're not going to bring 21st century conversations to the table to solve 21st century challenges, then we're going to continue seeing those disparities. I think the two most pressing needs right now for the Worcester Public Schools, that in terms of how they're served by the school committee, are transparency and community engagement and accountability. And I think that the fact that there are 8 challengers running for school committee this year, most of which have been involved in the schools in other ways. So we have 2 recent alums, we have 5 parents, and a former teacher, a retired teacher, all running. To me, that says that parents, teachers, and students are not seeing themselves represented at the table. And that kind of community engagement that brings our voices to the table to work in authentic collaboration towards our shared priorities, which I think are shared, is critical to a successful, thriving experience for every young person in our schools. Making it clear, not just with our words, but with our actions, to families and to teachers and to students, that what they say and believe about what's happening in classrooms matters, is going to be a first step to actually being able to bring more community engagement to the table. And then the next is accountability. I think that some of the most troubling things that happened this spring were a lack of acknowledgement of people's lived experiences, of the challenges that we were seeing at the table. So nobody is saying that if we acknowledge that there are problems we have to solve, that nothing good is happening. And I feel like the kind of defensiveness that we saw from a lot of folks this spring, to me, shows a lack of maturity that is, if we expect it from our young people, then we need to be modeling it. And part of that is being open to criticism as a pathway forward. I have been a white woman executive director of an organization that predominantly serves communities of color for over a decade. If I was not open to hearing criticism about how I could better serve a community I have never been a part of, I've certainly been, I grew up in Maine South, I've always lived in and among communities of color, I am in a mixed race family, but I will not and have never been a person of color. And acknowledging that that matters is something we have not seen this school committee do. And so we cannot build in the tools for accountability if we're not even willing to acknowledge what we need to measure. We heard a lot from the current school committee about our strategic plan. And a strategic plan is a guidepost for every decision you make. It should be referenced not just in candidates forums, it should be referenced in every school committee meeting. It should be literally a measuring stick for every decision we're making, and we're not seeing it used that way. So I'm not sure that we even have the skills at the table right now to do the accountability that the students and teachers and families in this district deserve. I am running for school committee because I grew up in Maine South. I went to Worcester Public Schools because of the opportunities I had as a Worcester Public School student to build my creativity, to work in collaborative groups, to have internships, to then go on to Clark for free because I grew up in Maine South. Because of those opportunities, I went on to get my doctorate in education. And because those opportunities have not been equally allocated, equitably allocated, I'm the only person that grew up on my block that has a doctorate in education. And that is not because I'm smarter or more capable than my neighbors. It's because we have not done the work we need to do to make sure that every kid in our district has access to the things they need, each young person needs, to thrive. And so I am running for school committee so that 27,000 kids in our district have the opportunities that I had. My name is Dr. Cara Berg Powers, and you can learn more about our campaign at powersforworcester.com or across social media at Powers for Worcester.